Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox with CJ Goodwyn for the inaugural episode. We are so thrilled to be with you for this season. In this episode, CJ and I are going to visit about his career as a film director leading up to the current movie in production, Mare of the Night. So, CJ, first of all, welcome and thank you so much for sitting down, taking the time to visit with me for this season. We're going to have a ton of fun.
Of course, Tom, I really appreciate the opportunity and looking forward to sharing my journey with you.
And that's exactly what I wanted to do in this episode. Have you known since you were 3 you wanted to be a director, or were you one of those kids that picked up a camera and never put it down? What got you the bug?
Let's see. I think when I was a kid, I definitely did a lot of more of the acting side of wanting to be an actor and imitating certain people like Jim Carrey and some of these other funny characters. I used to try to, I guess, be the class clown for my family. And from there, I've always enjoyed telling stories and imagine what it would be like if I was able to create this. But I was pretty locked in the sports world. Me and my brothers, we did sports since I was 4 years old. And so I was more on the sports life for a while there, all the way through college. I played at Tybee High School. I went to Shriner University, played soccer there as well. And then after I graduated, that's really when I didn't have any more sports left. And then the idea of making films started to creep back into my mind. And I think when I was, I guess, 28, 29, I went to the movies with my mom because my mom and I, we always go during Thanksgiving. It's like the thing that we do. And we'll go watch at least 3 films on that day. And it just happened to be like 2 horror films that year. And we were watching them and, everyone has their opinions. I'm just like, man, like, I just feel like I could do something like this, if not better. And then my ego kind of jumped in. And then my mom, being who my mom is, she's like, why don't you go make one? I was like, maybe I will. And that was the funny way of kickstarting my, I guess, filmmaking career. So that night I went home and I wrote a script in about, I don't know, 6 or 7 weeks. And then I got my friends and family and I went out and made my first featured film probably 3 or 4 months later, called GH5. And the rest is history.
Or was a high school Joe Jock as well, although I was in football, basketball, and track. What did you get out of that experience that you think maybe actually still applies to what you do now? It made me super competitive, and whether it's competing with myself or others, it doesn't matter. I want to win, but I also want to work as hard as I can to put myself in position. Did you take away anything like that, or really anything else from just the world of sports growing up as a kid playing at Tivy and even at Shriner?
Yeah, for sure. I think being the middle child in my family, my brother Matt, who works at Shriner, he 2 years older than I am. And so he kind of got a lot of the limelight, I guess, moving up. He was always first in club, first on varsity. And so just kind of watching him be successful and grow and be like, I mean, watching that, I want that. How can I get that? And it just kind of pushed me to be a little bit hungrier, I guess. Everyone's blessed with certain talents and skill sets. My brother Matt was always faster than I was, and in soccer, that definitely helps. So I got really good at more ball control skills and doing like moves and things like that. And we were both successful playing soccer. My brother Matt, he actually broke the school scoring record when he was on varsity. But then 2 years later, I broke his record. And so then I was the leading scorer for a season on varsity. That just shows a little bit of the competitive nature that we had. My mom instilled that into myself and my brothers in every sport we played. I played in basketball. Coach Brian Young was my coach when I was at high school at Tybee, the basketball coach. And he put a lot of hard love on us as players, which I really enjoyed. I enjoyed the competition and that pressure. So I think it definitely built me into who I am, being a filmmaker who's independent, where you have over 100 people that are basically volunteering or looking to you for leadership on these films. I think that definitely comes into play. But what's interesting is that I wasn't really looking for the limelight or like competing against really other people. It was more like competing against myself. Is this something that I can do? So like in my mind, it's like the filmmaking world. Like I want to get my films into theaters across the nation. I want to prove to myself that I can do it. And when you're doing that, you find that you start picking up others along the way that are looking to you as a person of inspiration, that maybe they can do that themselves. And I think in the beginning, I definitely didn't know or think anything of that. But as my career has continued on, that's definitely come into play, which is awesome. Yeah, I'm super happy to help others with their dreams and their goals. But yeah, I think just to go back to what you're saying, I think that's stimulated through just sports and the grind and holding yourself accountable and responsible, especially if you're on a team like football or soccer. It's not an individual sport. You got to be a team player and you got to work together as one for a certain goal. So all those things combined help. I was an athlete for 20 years. That was my life when I was younger. So I could definitely say it helped, for sure.
So tell us, first of all, what year or years was your first film produced and then distributed?
So my first film, again, was GH5, and we started making that, I believe, when I was about 29. So we probably wrapped when I was around 30. And just to give people reference, I'm 43. So I guess that was about 13 years ago. And with my first film, not really knowing much about the film world, a lot of it was just my education, just jumping in and making a feature film, the first thing that you do ever. Like I didn't do a short film. I just jumped in and made a feature. It's kind of unheard of. Most people take baby steps and I didn't, but I'm glad I didn't because I'd learned a ton. So my first film was basically just like going to school and without going to school, hands-on experience, ran into a lot of problems, which you do on every film. And so it's like a sink or swim feeling. Like you're even going to step up and figure this out and make it work, or you can quit. And that's definitely not in my blood. And I always keep going. So when it came to distribution, I really didn't know, to be honest, with my first film. My first goal was like, I just want to make a featured film. And then once it's done, I want to try to figure out what I do with it. And unfortunately, that was probably the bad way to go about it. You should probably look into knowing what you're going to do with your film before you even start the project, whether it's distribution, festivals, theaters, things of that nature. My film, although it was completed and I'm proud of it, it really wasn't good enough to be like in big festivals or probably even mid-tier festivals. It was really just an accomplishment getting it completed and then proving to myself that I could do it. And then from there, it was just, all right, now let's make another film, but let's make it 10 times better than the last one. And so what do I need to do better? And it's, I need to do audio better. I need to do lighting better. I need to do this. So you just kind of keep learning and growing. So that was really my first film. The first film didn't really do anything as far as distribution. We showed it to friends and family. We had small little private showings of it. And that was about it.
All right. What was your second film?
So my second film was called Jackson, and it offers like a standalone film, but to be honest, it's actually a prequel to my first film, GH5. I just thought there was more story to tell there. And on my first film is when I met the actor Les Best. And I've been with Les for 13 years now. He's been on every featured film that I've done. So we developed a relationship with GH5, which he had a very small part in that film. And I didn't realize at the time that that was obviously the best actor in the movie. And he was very well known in the indie film. He's been like on the HBO series, like The Leftovers, and he's done some big things in the indie world. And also just, so I reached out to him and I asked him like, hey man, would you be interested in doing this film Jackson where you're the lead and we can kind of continue on with this story? I think I have something that's really cool that we could tap into. And he said yes. And so with Jackson, we built our relationship on that film for sure. And it's just another kind of branch from GH5. It did better. We showed it at like the Shriner Comic-Con. We showed it at the San Antonio Comic-Con. We showed it at some smaller theaters here in San Antonio. We showcased it online. It was on Amazon Prime Video for a while before the Amazon Prime did away with certain aspects. They kind of rebooted like the industry format. And so it got taken down. That was the first time I was able to get it on like a distribution site, like an Amazon video. And, made a little bit of money off of it. Yeah. Not too much, but a little bit. And it just kind of just resets the fire. And after Jackson, it was a psychological horror film like my first one. And so I didn't want to get, bogged down into being just a filmmaker that can make only one genre. And I really loved Roman history. And that led me into my next film, Eyes of a Roman. And
Before you get to Eyes of Roman, I wanted to ask you, you talked about the film Jackson coming out of the first film because you had more story to tell.
Mhm.
And that really leads me to ask, I've thought of filmmakers certainly as storytellers, but you also talked about just some of the parts of filmmaking, audio, sound, lighting, etc. And there's, I don't know, hundreds more probably, all part of a creative process. Is there a part of that process you enjoy the most, or is it all putting it all together what you enjoy?
Yeah, I think the majority of it I do enjoy. I think some more than others. I think the exciting part is always the story concept. You kind of found the story that you want to tell, and it's unique, it's different. It hasn't been told like 1,000 times, which Hollywood does on certain films. And it kind of speaks to you, and it's something that you want to see. I always tell filmmakers, make sure you're making something that you want to see, and not really so much what you think others will like or want. Because you're going to spend 3 years of your life making this if it's a featured film. But I think probably the hardest part for me on the filming side, since I do wear a lot of hats, is probably more on the post production, layering audio, cleaning up audio. That's not my favorite, although it's very important. That's probably the most important part, is making sure you have great audio. But it's just very tedious and time consuming, and there's not really much creativity on that side if you're just layering on the good audio when people are talking. So it's really just a job. There's really not much fun behind it. Now, once you add in Foley works and sound effects and things like that, that's fun. But my love is really like writing the scripts, bringing the story to life, and then being on set where the magic happens. And being on set is you spend the least amount of time filming the movie. You spend more time on pre-production and post-production. When you're filming, there's normally just a couple of months. And then pre-production's like a year and post-production's like a year and a half. So I think the fun part is really just being on set. You're with the cast and crew. Everyone has one goal to make a great film. And so we're all just working together. And I enjoy teaching as well. And I always get a lot of new people and volunteers on my films, people that want to be gaffers or they want to be cinematographers or directors, whatever. And so I like to teach them and show them how to set up proper scenes with framing and blocking. And this is why we're doing this. This is why we're doing that. And so as we progress through filmmaking of the film, probably after about 6 weeks, now they kind of know what to do. And so I can just tell them, hey, let's get this set for this scene. And they know how to light the scene for me, where when we first started, they didn't know anything. So it's really fun to watch and see people grow throughout the process as well. But yeah, the kind of short answer to your question, I think the storytelling and the writing is my favorite part of the process. And then just being on set filming. And then probably the worst part is layering the audio.
Podcast producer, I completely get that. I think you said the name of the third film was Eyes of a Roman. Did I get that right?
That's correct. Yeah.
So tell us about that film and the process you went through to create that movie.
Yeah, so Eyes of a Roman was on a much bigger scale. So my first two films, we maybe had 20 to 25 people involved. And then with Eyes of a Roman, it tells about Marcus Crassus and Spartacus. And the story is basically 3 days. And it's the day before the final battle between Spartacus and Marcus Crassus. And it's the day after. And so I told a story between those 3 days of those events. And basically what I did is I created a unknown stepchild of Marcus Crassus. And so we kind of followed his story and his beliefs and kind of what happens in that side of things. But again, I've never done like a Roman action adventure. It was new to me, which is part of the fun of being a filmmaker. I always want to continue to challenge myself and not kind of stay in my comfort zone. I want to keep challenging and grow and get bigger and better at different aspects. So the Roman film to me made sense. Like COVID kind of hit at that time. And Derek Mare, who's someone I've worked with on a few of my films, him and his family have some property just outside of Kerrville and 1,600 acres of land. And he's, hey, come check out my property. Let's see if this would work. And of course it did. The landscape actually is very similar to the landscape back then in the Roman times, which was nice for us. I mean, it's not perfect, but it's pretty close. And being with COVID, everything kind of shut down. But since we were outdoors and it's private property, we're like, why not? Let's go for it. And so obviously you do all the proper the COVID things they ask you to do on filmmaking. And then really just up to the people if they want to be involved or not. You know what I mean? But that one was pretty wild because we got like 120, 130 extras to be a part of all the battle sequences. And I got a fight choreographer. Her name's Clarissa. And we went through it for months. And we had 3 weekends where everyone met at a park here in San Antonio. And so we were out there going through all the fight choreography for 3 weekends. And that way, when we were on set, everyone already knew their blocking. Everyone already knew what they're going to be doing. So we weren't wasting time when we were filming. So it was a big taking on just on that small piece of it. There's only maybe 15, 20 minutes of fighting in the movie. But obviously that was an important piece. And I take everything seriously. I want to try to make the best film I possibly can. And so do these actors. I mean, the actors, they love their craft and they want to be as good as they possibly can too. So that was a really cool moment. I asked everyone to start eating healthy, start bulking up. I mean, we're all in the gym, we're working out and we're all eating healthy. Is kind of like what the Hollywood actors do as well. They just get paid and they have 6 chefs. We didn't have that. And so it's really being dedicated to your craft, you know. It was a
So
lot of
how was the production and then distribution of that film?
Yeah, so that one was definitely a bigger step in the right direction. Again, I showed it at a few places, including the Kylo Theater in Kerrville, more Comic-Con type events. I showed it in Fredericksburg's theater as well, and then some locally here in the San Antonio area. And then I actually went through Film Hub, which is a distribution site really for indie filmmakers. And Film Hub's did pretty good for me. Again, it gets you out there on platforms, but let's not sugarcoat it. These companies, they take the majority of the funds, whatever's made. It says you get 80%, but if you really do the math, it doesn't really add up. Yeah, I think right now, like on one of my channels for Eyes of a Roman, we have 600,000 people that have seen the film, which is awesome. It's amazing. I think I've made a couple $100 off of that. So that's the reality of the filmmaking world going through streaming services, which we'll talk about later down the road on your podcast. But that's why I'm hitting the theaters as hard as I can on my next film coming up. But that was the process. I was super happy to see my film. Obviously, it was on Tubi, it was on Amazon, it was on Plex, it was on all these different channels. It's probably on 15 channels across the world. I've had people from Germany and England and Australia reach out to me and say how much they enjoyed the film. So it's really cool that the film is obviously globally and people are watching it on a global scale. But again, the money-making side of things, it's still just really not there for indie filmmakers like myself. And it's a challenge, man. It's a struggle. And it's definitely frustrating if you're an indie filmmaker. It's like, how do you break down that wall? What's the step? And I believe I do have the answer to that, which we can talk about later. But yeah, that was the distribution for Eyes of a Roman. So again, another good step in the right direction. Got my film out there globally. Millions of people have watched it to this point, which is awesome. You obviously want people to watch your work. I don't want it to be a hobby. I want to be a successful filmmaker that makes money, where I can start really paying my cast and crew in a good way, where everyone's doing this professionally, where this is our living. We go and make films, we get paid for it, and then we go home. Right now, everyone's got at least another job or 2 jobs, especially with how the economy is right now. So it's a challenge, man. You really gotta love making films if you're a filmmaker because it can definitely eat you up and spit you out and then eat you up again. It's tough. It's tough.
CJ, what would you say are some of the key lessons you learned from film one to film two to film three? And maybe even should we throw out film one because everything you learned was new for that one?
Mhm.
But how would you say what maybe two or three top lessons you've learned over the course of these first three films you've done?
Yeah, I think patience is very important. I think there's a lot of filmmakers that kinda wanna rush their products and get it out there for people to see. And to be honest, I've never really been like that. I think anyone that's worked with me, they probably pull their hair out because 'cause they're like, "Why is it taking so long to get this movie done and get it made?" But, I really try as hard as I can to make the best film possible before it's released, which obviously that takes time. On a technical side, I think it's really learning how to light certain scenes and how to block certain scenes. If you look at some of the great directors of our time, like a Spielberg or James Wan, if you like horror, or Ridley Scott, if you watch their framing and their blocking, they can tell a story without having to do 20 cuts in a scene. They can just keep the camera rolling for 10 minutes without cutting because they know how to block a scene and how to move a camera, which keeps you really engaged in the film without you even realizing it. And Spielberg was doing that all the way back on Jaws. He has shots that go like that. Raiders of the Lost Ark with Indiana Jones, there's scenes in there where it's 4 or 5 minutes and the camera doesn't change. Like he just kind of follows an actor to one scene to the next. So those things, the lighting is very important. If you don't light a certain scene the right way, you'll get into post-production while you're editing. You're like, wow, that scene's too dark. And then, of course, you can't just raise up the light. There is no light. And that gives you a grainy look on your film. But I always tell every filmmaker, audio is the most important. If your audio sounds horrible, it doesn't matter what you do. No one's going to watch it. And so from film 2 to 3, audio was on my mind because I wanted to make sure that wasn't going to hurt the film in any way. So going into every film that I make, I'm always doubling down on audio just to make the audio even better than the last film. How can we continue to make this better, not just for me, but for my sound designer and composer, Antonio, who I've worked with on my last 3 films. It's every film, the audio gets better, which is great. But it's not like you can just throw it on there and it's perfect. So we're really trying to make that the number one priority. And then from there, you just kind of keep updating the technical stuff, better lights, better filters, cameras. I think filmmakers, photographers, yeah, I think the camera gets a lot of love. I think more love than lighting and sound, which I believe is the exact opposite of how it should go. I really think it should go audio, lighting, then the camera. There's a lot of cameras out there nowadays that can do the job really well. Some people make films off of their cameras or their camera phones now. And so if you know how to light a scene, you can almost use any camera. $400, $500 camera. As long as you know how to light a scene the proper way, it's still going to come out looking really good. Now, obviously, if you got like an 8K or a 4, like a red or something, yeah, it's going to look like Lord of the Rings on TV. But unless you have $100,000 to spend on a camera, that's just not the reality.
CJ, unfortunately, we're near the end of our time for this episode. I wanted to thank you again, and I look forward to continuing this conversation.
Yeah, Tom, of course. Looking forward to the next episodes coming up. Really appreciate it. And I will talk to you soon.